Throughout the ages, history has been largely told through the voices of kings, emperors, and generals' names, etched in marble and celebrated in chronicles. But hidden beneath this layer of masculine dominance lies a narrative just as fierce, just as bloody, and often even more awe-inspiring. The story of the women who picked up sword, spear, or bow and fought with unbreakable resolve. These weren't just queens ruling from gilded thrones. They were warriors who rode into battle, who faced steel and fire head-on, and who left behind legends so powerful that even centuries later, their names ignite. To open this story, let's step into a battlefield where smoke clings to the air, horses scream in terror, and men, hardened by war, pause when they see a woman leading the charge. That is no ordinary sititz. The embodiment of defiance itself, as historian Antonia Fraser once remarked in her book Warrior Queens. These women stood as living contradictions to the traditional order, and yet they were embraced as symbols of something greater than themselves. Today, we allel journey through the lives of the most implacable warrior women in history figures, whose courage wasn't softened by fear, whose leadership rivaled that of any man, and whose legacy challenges our very understanding of strength. And by the end, we allel uncover a message not just for women but for every single person who has ever dared to rise against the impossible. Consider Boudica, queen of the Iceni, who, in 60 AD, transformed from a grieving mother into the scourge of the Roman Empire. After witnessing her daughters violated and her people humiliated, she didn't retreat into despair. She ignited a rebellion that would set Britain ablaze. The Roman historian Tacitus describes how she addressed her warriors before battle. "It is not as a woman descended from noble ancestry, but as one of the people that I am avenging lost freedom." Imagine the sight. A towering figure with wild red hair cascading to her waist, mounted on a chariot, thundering through Roman lines while entire cities fell to her fury. The historian Ronald Hutton once wrote, "In Boudica, we find not only the embodiment of vengeance, but the rallying cry of resistance itself." Though her rebellion was ultimately crushed, her story outlived empires, echoing down the centuries as proof that even the might of Rome could tremble before a woman's wrath. Across the steppes of Central Asia, another name rose: Tomiris, queen of the Masai, a warrior feared even by Cyrus the Great. When the Persian king sought to subdue her people, Tomiris responded not with submission, but with open defiance. Her forces clashed with Cyrus, and legend tells us that after his death in battle, Tomiris ordered his severed head to be plunged into a vessel of blood, declaring, "You thirsted for blood, and now drink your fill." Her brutality wasn't senseless. It was symbolic, a declaration that no empire, no matter how vast, would consume her people without consequence. Historian Herodotus, though writing centuries ago, ensured her name would never fade. Tomiris is remembered as a woman who not only held her ground but crushed one of the greatest conquerors in history. Shift to East Asia, where Hua Mulan's tale, immortalized in poetry and later romanticized by popular culture, emerges as one of both legend and truth. While the precise details blur between history and myth, the Ballad of Mulan has survived since the Northern Wei dynasty, telling of a young woman who took her father's place in the army, concealing her identity for years, while fighting with unmatched skill and loyalty. What makes Mulan so enduring is not merely her martial prowess, but the symbolic weight of her story. As Maxine Hong Kingston explored in The Woman Warrior, the legend of Mulan bridges duty, sacrifice, and the challenge to gender roles in a society bound by tradition, whether entirely historical or not. The impact of her story is undeniable. Millions across centuries have looked to Mulan as proof that courage knows no gender. And yet, the Middle Ages brought us women who were far more than legends. Take Joan of Arc, a peasant girl, from who claimed visions from saints guided her mission. By the age of 17, she was leading French forces against the English in the 100 Years' War. Chronicles describe her clad in white armor, a banner in hand, riding at the front lines with a resolve that inspired men twice her age. Mark Twain, who once devoted an entire novel to her life, declared, "She was perhaps the only entirely unselfish person whose name has a place in profane history." Joan's victories helped shift the tide of war, proving that faith and conviction could wield power as tangible as any sword. Even in death, burned at the stake, as a heretic she became larger than life, a martyr whose presence still galvanizes hearts 6 centuries later. But Joan was not alone. Consider Nakano Takeko of Japanese Aizu domain during the Boshan War of 1868. Trained in martial arts, she fought with the naginata, a weapon whose sweeping strikes demanded strength and grace alike. Leading a unit of female warriors called the Yoshitai Nakano, charged into battle against the imperial forces. When mortally wounded, she asked her sister to sever her head to prevent the enemy from taking it as a trophy. Her final act wasn't one of despair, it was of honor. Historian Stephen Turnbull, in his studies of samurai women, highlights that Naka's story exemplifies the ultimate expression of loyalty and resolve in a society where women were expected to remain silent. Her courage shattered expectations and cemented her name among Japan's most respected warriors. Before we continue, let me pause for a moment. If stories like these captivate you, if you believe these forgotten warriors deserve to be remembered as much as kings and generals, then make sure to subscribe to Vertex of Time. Every week, we dive deep into the battles, the myths, and the untold chapters of history, bringing the past alive with the fire it deserves. So, join USB, part of this journey through time, where forgotten legends finally rise again. Now, let us look toward the African continent, where the story of Nzinga Mbandi, Queen of Ndango and Matamba in the 17th century, stands as one of the fiercest testaments to female leadership in wartime. Facing Portuguese colonization, Nzinga employed not only her warrioress spirit, but also her unmatched cunning in diplomacy and guerrilla tactics. She forged alliances, mastered psychological warfare, and even took to the battlefield herself. John Thornton, in A History of West Central Africa, emphasizes that Nzinga's reign was marked by unyielding defiance against imperial forces, making her one of the most formidable rulers of her time. For over 3 decades, she resisted colonial domination, leaving behind a legacy of independence that inspires Angolans to this very day. Equally formidable was the legacy of Artemisia I of Caria, a naval commander who fought under Xerxes during the Greco-Persian Wars at the Battle of Salamis in 480 BC. While many Persian commanders faltered, Artemisia's tactics stood out so sharply that even Herodotus, often dismissive of women, praised her brilliance. "My men have become women, and my women men," Xerxes is said to have remarked upon seeing her valor in a sea dominated by male admirals. Artemisia's presence was both shocking and unforgettable, a reminder that war does not discriminate in recognizing genius. From ancient deserts to medieval fields, from Asian dynasties to African kingdoms, the pattern is clear. Women have never been mere spectators of history, they've been its firebrands, its rebels, its unyielding warriors. And what does this tell us today? That strength, courage, and the will to fight for what matters most cannot be chained by gender. To every woman watching this, the message is eternal. You carry within you the same fire that burned in Boudica, the same resilience that guided Joan, the same strategy that made Nzinga unbreakable. And to every man watching, these stories are reminders that true strength recognizes no boundaries, no stereotypes. It is universal, and it is human. So the next time you hear history told only through kings and conquerors, remember the warriors who defied every expectation. Remember that behind the veil of time, there were women whose swords clashed just as loudly, whose courage burned just as fiercely, and whose names demand to be spoken aloud. Their legacy isn't just about battles fought centuries ago, it's about proving, again and again, that when conviction meets courage, nothing, no empire, no prejudice, no obstacle can stand in its way. And so, as we close this journey, remember the immortal words of historian Antonia Fraser. The warrior queen represents not only the power of the female, but the potential of the human spirit when pushed to its limits. These women weren't just fighters. Their names, their sacrifices, their victories, and even their defeats remind us of one undeniable truth. Courage belongs to all of us.